Hey guys, welcome back to the Hands-On channel. I'm glad you stopped by. I wanted to talk to you today about something that I think is very important that doesn't get talked about nearly enough. It's not taught in schools. It's not taught in U.S. history or anything. It's just not even talked about. It's kind of the ignored topic, and it's a big part, really the main contributing factor to all of the collapse we're seeing all around our country, all around our local stores and things like that. When you go to buy something and you can't get it, or it's 2 or 3 times more, and you're having to make decisions between buying a tank of gas or putting food on the table. A lot of this stuff that I'm going to read to you today plays right into that stuff. And I want to get right into this. And what is it? It's the 45 rules the communists have for America, the American takeover, the destruction of everything that you and I hold dear. And to explore this, I'm going to need my anti-communist glasses. So we're going to put these on and we're going to get right into this because we've got a lot of material to cover here. I'll put up a link to where I got this article from. This person that wrote this article did a great job of breaking down every one of these goals, and we're going to try to scan through them as quickly as we can because I don't want to lose anybody here. Number 1, communist goal of the 45 for America. U.S. acceptance of coexistence as the only alternative to atomic war. So, Ronald Reagan exposed the great lie when he led the West to prove that coexistence was not the only alternative. By outspending, outproducing, and outcompeting on multiple fronts, he forced the USSR into financial ruin and political dissolution in 1991 without launching a single nuclear strike. Unfortunately, the peace through strength formula that Reagan applied back in the 80s was abandoned by his successors, who returned to the weaker position of coexistence and unilateral disarmament. So, I mean, you can just see in the different things that Barack Obama did while he was president, they weakened the United States. You can go all the way back to the Hillary Uranium One deal, and even before that, the things that the Clintons did that gave our enemies abilities that they never would have reached, at least not anytime soon on their own. So that's a big deal. It's basically the U.S. laying down and saying, oh, we accept coexistence. So let's get into number 2. U.S. willingness to capitulate in preference to engaging in atomic war. The only wild card in these scenarios is the fluid political willpower that is constantly mutating and evolving away from peace through strength. This pattern of appeasement and capitulation has led to a weaker America, the exact fulfillment of the original communist goals. So all of this stuff was about weakening the United States of America, taking us down a notch or two, and all the way to the bottom if they could destroy us. You'll see as we get into this. So a lot of the things that we're seeing here that are destroying our country are going to come out later on in these 45 goals. Number 3, develop the illusion that total disarmament by the United States would be a demonstration of moral strength. So you'll have the moral high ground if you do it first, right? If we surrender all of our defensive capabilities first, that's like, extending the olive branch, right? Well, a movement to disarm the United States has been growing since the 1950s. In fact, unilateral disarmament was the lifelong philosophy of Paul Warnke, who negotiated the SALT II Treaty with Russia in 1972 through 79. Number 4, permit free trade between all nations regardless of communist affiliation, regardless of whether or not items could be used for war. So isn't that interesting? In the past, we had things set up to where you weren't going to be trading with a communist nation because the communists' goals and agendas and the Marxist goals and agendas were anti-American. Therefore, we didn't want to help those people, right? The Mutual Defense Assistance Control Act of 1951, also known as the Battle Act, named after its sponsor, Representative Laurie C. Battle of Alabama. So it banned U.S. economic reconstruction aid to countries doing business with the Soviet Union. So in the past, we would say, hey, no, you're working with the communists. We're not going to, sell you this stuff just so you could sell it to the communists or whatever, right? As a proxy, right, to the communists. So this whole thing just mutilated that. It made it to where it was open season. They could have whatever they wanted. Extension of long-term loans to Russia and Soviet satellites. This is number 5. So this has been established U.S. policy since 1971 and has continued with individual Soviet nations after the USSR fell in 1991. The generosity of the U.S. to help others in need is an important stabilizing influence in the world. Problems arise when such help allows nations to surplus resources to arm themselves to attack others. So we're arming and equipping our enemies. If nothing else, even if not directly, we're doing it indirectly. Number 6, provide American aid to all nations regardless of communist domination. The U.S. gives aid to more than 150 nations. Many of them are ruled by dictators, terrorists, and communists. That still's going on today. I mean, it's probably going on even more so now that we're in this big war with Ukraine and we're sending them just blank checks, billions and billions and billions and all kinds of high-tech military equipment. For what? I don't know. It looks like to start World War III. That's what it's seeming like whenever I look at the news. So, number 7, grant recognition of Red China, admission of Red China to the UN. So when the 45 communist goals were first published in 1961, many said the idea of recognize avowed enemies such as China and admitting them to the UN was ludicrous. That opposition was abandoned when President Nixon initiated the process of China's recognition to the UN in 1972, and later President Carter consummated it in 1979. So there you go. Our own presidents sold us out. One of them a Republican, one of them a Democrat. Isn't that weird? It's almost as if there's a uniparty out there controlling things. Number 8, set up East and West Germany as separate states in spite of Khrushchev's promise in 1955 to settle the Germany question by free elections under the supervision of the UN. So friction between the U.S. and USSR escalated in Eastern Europe, where the Soviets wanted to keep European boundaries as they were when World War II ended. At that time, Germany was divided into 2 states, and smaller Eastern European states, including the Baltic states, would become permanent members of the USSR, whether they wanted it or not. Number 9, prolong the conferences to ban atomic tests because the U.S. has agreed to suspend tests as long as the negotiations are in progress. So these commies figured out how they could keep on testing their weapons a little bit longer just by prolonging them and prolonging the conferences. This operated to the distinct advantage of the Soviet Union, which continued its testing long after the U.S. stopped. Negotiations plodded along for 8 years until 1963, when the U.S. and the USSR agreed to limit a limited ban. The U.S. planners hoped that a U.S./USSR nuclear alliance would pressure China away from developing its own nuclear weapons. Clearly that didn't work out. Number 10, allow all Soviet satellites individual representation in the UN. Isn't that interesting? With the fall of the USSR, most of the satellite nations once were under domination by the Soviet Union received recognition in the UN. These dozen or so states brought more strength to the radical left in the UN. As a result, Western Europe and America have virtually abandoned the UN as an instrument of constructive action. Although, when you look at this clown that's in charge right now, he hasn't abandoned the UN. Now, perhaps Trump tried to abandon the UN and some other presidents backed off of it, but Obama and Biden and people on the left are embracing the UN with open arms and giving them all of our power, basically signing over our sovereignty. So, number 11, promote the UN as the only hope for mankind. Isn't that convenient? They got all their Soviet satellite states in there, so they have more votes than anybody else, and now they want to promote the UN as the only hope for mankind. If its charter is rewritten, demand that it be set up as a one-world government with its own independent armed forces. And you got to remember, this stuff is ancient history. Why aren't we learning about this? Why aren't the teachers teaching about this stuff in American history? This seems like a pretty important part. Instead, they concentrate on how terrible McCarthy was and all this other stuff that tried to get communism rooted out of our country. They talk about how that's a bad thing. McCarthyism was a super bad thing, right? And I'm not saying his tactics were perfect, but McCarthy was right. No wonder the poor guy drank himself to death. In 2009, a call for global democracy was introduced at the UN. The following year, a UN body urged support for a treaty that would regulate private military and security companies. Hundreds of other UN proclamations called for socialist, communist agenda items, including national health care, acquiescence by all nations to a world court. Where we heard that world court thing before. Subservience to the world's collective will, and the institutionalization of a new moral structure superseding the people's will. We're getting saucy now. Things are starting to heat up. Number 12, resist any attempt to outlaw the Communist Party. The Supreme Court has thwarted attempts to outlaw the Communist Party. In cases such as Yates against the United States in 1957, the court determined that advocating subversive action against the United States was lawful under the First Amendment until it became an advocacy of immediate action to forcibly overthrow the U.S. government. In other words, people are free to organize and lecture and plot to overthrow the U.S. government so long as they don't actually try to do it. So that was all determined in that one Supreme Court case, and you know how that goes. Once they do that, they say they have precedence, and they can do it over and over and over again off of that one Supreme Court case. Number 13, do away with all loyalty oaths. So this is not a reference to the Pledge of Allegiance. It refers to Article 6 of the Constitution that requires government employees and elected leaders to be legally bound by personal oath or affirmation to uphold the law and the Constitution and not engage in subversive activities or associate with groups that are subversive. For more than 5 decades, loyalty oaths have come under attack as an infringement on free speech. Oaths have been disappearing over time. Number 14, continue giving Russia access to the U.S. Patent Office. And it's not just Russia, it's China. Trade secrets may be protected by members of the World Trade Organization, but as with all New World Order type organizations, such groups can't prevent an adversary from gaining valuable knowledge that could be used against the best interests of the U.S. So it's just too bad, so sad. Yeah, you invented it. Yeah, you got the patent, but we're going to go ahead and make it without your permission. How do you like them apples? Number 15, capture one or both of the political parties in the United States. Has that happened yet? I mean, I talked about it earlier. It seems as if we have a uniparty here in this country for the most part. This has been done indirectly through domestic socialists in both the Republican and Democrat parties who have used Congress, the White House, and the State Department to foster policies favorable to the communist countries at the expense of the security and economic interests of the U.S. and its allies. So, stabbing the United States, our Constitution, our founding documents and principles right in the back. Really not even in the back. They're doing it in the front. And no one even talks about this stuff. Why is that? I mean, capture one or both of the political parties in the United States. That's what the communists wanted to do, and yet that's what we see when we look around. We wonder, why is it not any different when George W. Bush leaves office and Barack Obama comes in? He says he's going to be anti-war, and yet he goes out and does more war than the guy before. It just doesn't make any sense. Maybe he uses different tactics like drone strikes in the middle of the night and stuff like that, you know, bombing aspirin factories like the Clintons did. So it's just, they've captured both parties, guys. That's what we're experiencing here. Number 16, use technical decisions of the courts to weaken basic American institutions by claiming their activities violate civil rights. The Warren Court carried this to such an extreme that by 1962 it had become a national scandal. It eliminated prayer in public schools, Bible reading in public schools, and the teaching of Judeo-Christian values in public schools. Number 17, get control of the schools. Use them as a transmission belt for socialism and current communist propaganda. Soften the curriculum. Get control of teachers' associations. Put the party line in textbooks. So you're wondering why your kids are having to learn about all this stuff that you don't want them to learn about? This is it right here. The communists said what they were going to do back in 1963. It was read on the floor of the Congress. This is not hidden information. This is out there for anybody who has eyes to see and ears to hear, to read or listen to. So getting control included permeating the culture with corrosive and false perspectives about true principles of freedom and about those who brought them to America. For example, painting Western culture, capitalism, and traditional American values as divisive, one-sided, greedy, racist, or old-fashioned is commonplace today, and that is 100% absolutely true. Number 18, gain control of all student newspapers. Analogous to goal number 17, a vast majority of American student newspapers began reflecting the same anti-establishment, anti-authority perspectives, a trend which started in the 1960s, and it has not let up to this day. Anytime there's some new thing coming along, you'll hear all about it on the college campuses where they're rioting and protesting and doing stuff like this, right? The one thing you don't hear about on college campuses is anyone who's a conservative being open about it, or else you know, you'll just fail. You'll get kicked out of school or whatever. They'll just isolate you and make you feel like you're ostracized from the culture, which you are. So many conservatives that are currently going through college just keep their mouths shut. That's why our side is the silent majority, is we tend to keep our mouths shut because these liberals have figured out how to weaponize your conservatism against you and make you a bad person, a racist, a homophobe, a bigot, whatever. Number 19, this is really important. Use student riots to foment public protests against programs or organizations which are under communist attack. So very important. So we can think back to the so-called Occupy movement beginning in Wall Street in 2011. It was an attempt at a resurgence of those power to the people days to protest so-called social and economic inequality. Such inequality has but one solution according to the communist doctrine: government must take from the haves. Sounds pretty familiar, right? Number 20. Infiltrate the press. Get control of book review assignments, editorial writing, and policy-making positions. Media bias is hotly debated. I mean, I don't know why. It's pretty freaking transparent what the situation here with the media is. But media bias is hotly debated, especially by the biased press. In the 1990s, however, liberal historians began admitting they had been biased and that the modern American conservatism had largely been ignored. Several scholars began addressing that fact, but it was too late as the damage had already been done. American history teachers had stopped teaching about the presence of Americans in both parties who wanted the fundamental values and freedoms of America preserved. So there you go, guys. That's why our youth don't know what in the hell's going on and don't understand anything, is because they've been brainwashed by communists. It tells you right there. In the last 2 or 3 that we've been talking about education and the school system, this is how they've been doing this. What's the guy's name? Yuri Bezmenov. He basically said that they were going to demoralize the United States of America. And it would take a generation or two to infiltrate the schools and all that to gain control. So let's continue on here. Go check out Yuri Bezmenov. He was an ex-KGB guy that defected from the USSR, came over here and told us what their plans were. I mean, he lays it out perfectly. Right now, we're in the demoralization phase. So, number 21, gain control of key positions in radio, TV, and pictures. I mean, kind of the same thing as infiltrate the press. But for decades, a cry for tolerance in the name of free speech was pushed through Hollywood. Anyone expressing an opposing view to Hollywood's anything goes rebellion is ostracized. In Hollywood, all are equal, but some are more equal than others, just like in communism, just like in our government today. Not supposed to be this way. And if kids were taught the proper things when they're growing up about how government is supposed to operate and about their liberties and their freedoms, we wouldn't be having this discussion today. Number 22. Continue discrediting American culture by degrading all forms of artistic expression. An American communist cell was told, eliminate all good sculpture from parks and buildings. Substitute shapeless, awkward, and meaningless forms. So in the name of artistic license and free expression, images that are offensive to any number of audiences are displayed as if they are sophisticated works of art. Gone is the precision of masters, and their place is a new anger and twisted perspective on reality are well described as meaningless forms. It is the art of the fallen USSR. So think about that. When you see these very offensive things, these very offensive artworks, and they're pushed out to the front for everyone to see, why is that? Think back to number 23 here. That's what this is. The communists' 45 goals to destroy America. So next up, 23. Control art critics and directors of art museums. Our plan is to promote ugliness, repulsiveness, and meaningless art. Separating Americans from their highest ideals through meaningless or vulgar art is a turn back toward the swamp from which humans spent 6,000 years trying to escape. Goal 23 is well fulfilled across many layers of society. Number 24, eliminate all laws governing obscenity by calling them censorship and a violation of free speech and free press. So you may be wondering, what happened to Mayberry? What happened to shows like Andy Griffith and stuff like that? Well, they've been replaced by other shows that are edgy and violent and vulgar and disgusting and, on and on and on. Our values as a society, as a culture, are being eroded all the time. And who is doing it? Who's behind this ultimately? the communists. These people, including the Democrats, including many of the rhinos, they know about this stuff. They know this. They're implementing this. So Goal 24 was largely achieved when several parties sought Supreme Court clarification about obscenity, erotica, free speech, and censorship. And the court was unable to cleanly resolve the matter. So it's fine to censor people in today's world. It's fine to censor people that have a differing opinion than the mainstream media or the leftist, people in charge right now. But you can say whatever you want. You can be as obscene as you want. You can show disgusting images, even here on YouTube, and get away with it. And it's totally fine, as long as you're on the right side of the aisle, which is the communist side of the aisle, the left side of the aisle. Number 25, break down cultural standards of morality by promoting pornography, obscenity in books, magazines, motion pictures, radio, and TV. The world's largest porn site receives more than 4 billion hits a month. Other research estimates that 89% of all pornography is produced in the United States. As for viewership, the average high school boy spends at least 2 hours every week at adult websites, while 70% of all men 18 to 24 visit at least one adult site every month. So, this is it, the demoralization of the United States of America. This is how they've achieved this. So number 26, this is a bombshell one here, and you can see this happening all throughout our society. Present homosexuality, degeneracy, promiscuity as normal, natural, and healthy. That's what they're doing. That's what they've been doing. Studies of the gay lifestyle do not support stability in the homosexual relationships. A 1978 study found that 83% of homosexual men had 50 or more partners in their lifetime, while 28% had more than 1,000. Most lesbian studies showed that they had fewer than 10 same-sex partners, and rarely even with strangers. Before AIDS epidemic took hold, about 79% of the men said more than half their sex partners were strangers, 149. So, this has all been done by design to demoralize the United States of America. And we're supposed to be celebrating this month, as they have taken a whole month and call it Pride Month. And there's all kinds of nasty, nasty examples of the decay and the demoralization that's going on all around our country. Not only are they demoralizing our adult population, they're attacking our children by bringing them to, I heard one last week, strip clubs in Dallas. People were taking young kids into transsexual strip clubs in Dallas. And I don't think that's right. I don't think it's right for anyone to take a kid to any kind of strip club, much less allow touching and lap dances and other things like that were going on in this facility that should have people in an uproar. Let's just say it that way, the safe way. Other things are going on out in California, and they think it's great for the kids to be a part of this demoralization process that they're putting our children through. So guys, we're getting long here in the video. We're going to end it here. This is the end of part 1. Please stay tuned. We're going to have part 2 coming out very soon, because I want you guys to know all about this stuff. I'll provide a link where I got this information from, but it's out there for everyone to see. They're demoralizing the United States of America right now. We're way deep in it. We're more than knee deep. We're like waist or chest deep right now. It's up to here. And pretty soon we're going to be completely underwater with this stuff. So 1961 was the first time we ever heard of this stuff. Why, oh why, did we allow it to infest our nation? It's almost as if it's been done intentionally by design, and the people who have done it have certainly not done anything to stop it. They've certainly helped it along the way. Even though on occasion we get somebody in there that's halfway decent, they can't undo all of the stuff that these people have been doing for the last 60, 75 years. So communism is the most dangerous thing. Marxism, communism is the most dangerous idea that has ever been dreamt up. It's never succeeded. It always ends up with hundreds of millions of people being starved to death by their own governments. So anyways, stay tuned for part 2. We're going to get into some more of the nitty-gritty on this. It doesn't get any better. It gets more and more apparent that these things are all coming true or have come true. So appreciate you tuning in. I stand for liberty. I hope you do too. And until then, we'll see you next time.